All right, good to see everybody. Combine here, off to a little bit of a start. Got some interviews in last night and a few meetings this morning, and then back to interviews and workouts a little bit later this week. So with that, let them rip, guys.
Monti, we haven't really talked to you since the Buddha and the James extensions, and obviously the Trey one is kind of out there. What does it mean to get those things out of the way when you can, in terms of benefiting certainty and roster building and all that stuff?
Yeah, I think, Darren, all of that is important, right? I think, and I think most important is doing it with guys that you're talking about there. What JC and Buddha mean to our program. The way that they go about their work, the way that they prepare, the way that they lead, and then, ultimately the way that they perform on Sundays. And so, very excited to keep those guys into our program. Very excited about what they mean to us, have meant, and will continue to mean. And so it's one thing that we don't have to worry about here as we come here this week, that those guys aren't going to market, and we know we can count on them being in our lineup here for the foreseeable future.
Is it fair to say you guys see Trey the same kind of way?
Say that again?
Is it fair to say you guys see McBride the same kind of way?
Absolutely. Trey's a guy that he does everything the right way. He's a good leader for us on and off the field. He works, he prepares, and he produces. And so, Trey's definitely a guy that we want to continue to be in our program and continue to see what he can do for us offensively.
Monti, it's easy to connect the dots. Your head coach, Jonathan Gannon, has a lot of ex-players hitting the free agency market this week. Does that impact your evaluation, knowing that these players may have had success under your head coach once upon a time?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. You got to look back at each situation is unique. I think that's one of the challenges of free agency with any player that's available is, it's not a situation where you can pick up the phone and call that team and say, hey, tell me about player X, and so I think I'm a big fan of having information, any information that's good information, credible information. So we'll use all those avenues. We've had some other coaches that have come into our program from other teams, and so absolutely we'll ask them and guys that have firsthand knowledge of being with a player. Hey, what are they like on a day-to-day basis? What do they do well? What do they got to improve on? So absolutely, those are all avenues that we'll use and continue to gather that information as we make our decisions going into free agency.
What kind of priority is Trey this offseason, get that extension done, and then is this something you want to get done? Do you anticipate it getting done before camp?
Yeah, I don't know. Josh, I can't really give you a timeline on that, but yeah, certainly a guy that we would love to extend. Just again, back to Darren's comment, just to give us certainty of what we're dealing with from a cap perspective. So yeah, absolutely, Trey is a priority for us.
On every pick that you guys have made, day one, day two, it's been receiver, corner, pass rush, tackle. Is that purposeful? Or you guys were like that in Tennessee as well, or is the intent behind that, or just that's how it felt?
I'd say a little bit of both. I think we always talk about there's premium positions that we value, and sometimes those match up, and sometimes they don't. Ultimately we're gonna set our draft board, and we're gonna value players, and obviously there's a bunch of different positions, and we're in the end we're gonna pick the best player, and when those match up, your pick and positions of need and positions of value, when all those match up, then it turns out to be a good pick and what we're looking for. So, I think maybe that's a little bit of coincidence, but, also there's not coincidence as well. So.
As far as a couple of the guys you took on offense last year, what were the year-end evaluations on Marvin Harrison and on Trey Benson? And what do you expect from those guys coming in?
Yeah, I think with Marvin, really excited about where he is. Marvin led us in touchdown receptions last year. He was second on our team in receptions and yardage, and certainly room to grow. Marvin would be the first to say that, hey, there's things that I can do better, and he's hard at work in doing those. He's been in the facility every day since the end of the season. So really excited about where Marvin is, where he's going. Trey Benson, really saw some flashes from him in the second half of the season. Took him a little bit of time early in the season, but it's also tough because one of our best players on offense is playing in front of Trey, and so the opportunities for him weren't always there. And so I thought Trey did a better job in the second half of the season taking advantage of those opportunities when he got in there, and really excited about where he can go moving forward.
Monti, are you able to give a status update with regard to the injury to Jonah Williams?
Yeah, Jonah's working hard. Jonah's working extremely hard as he did this season. I think a little bit of his is underrated about what Jonah did this season, about how he was able to work himself back. It would have been real easy for Jonah to just say, hey, I'm going to sit back and let this heal up, and for him to come back and play at a pretty high level when he came back. But yeah, really not going to get into specifics on his injury, but he is progressing well, and looking forward to having him back next year.
Monti, in your experience, when does the trade market for those top draft picks really start to solidify? Like, when can you take seriously offers that you get for early round draft picks?
About an hour before the draft starts. There's a lot of talk this time of year, and I think there's just a lot of unknown about who's going where, and everybody's got a mock draft, and everybody's speculating, and so I don't think those really get too serious until the days leading up into the draft, and then ultimately probably until some teams are on the clock. So I think that's a little ways out yet.
How does it differ picking 3 and 4 and now picking 16? How is that different?
Yeah, huge difference, and I hope we continue to slide further back in the draft. That's why we're doing this. So, certainly a different feel for us this year going into this draft. Picking 3 and picking 4, we could narrow down who is going to be sitting there for us, and so it gets a little bit harder picking at 16. I think the importance of us staying flexible, and just, hey, you got to wait and see what happens in front of us, and then you got to wait and see what opportunities come your way. And so, those won't declare until a couple hours into the event on Thursday night. But I think it just adds a few more variables into than what we've dealt with the last couple of years.
How do you assess where you are on the defensive line right now?
Yeah, I think defensive line wise, last year we added some pieces in free agency, and we just took a barrage of injuries there, and it call it bad luck, whatever it was. We added some guys who had been durable, and they ran into the injury bug, and so I'd say the way that our guys stepped up, and the way that Coach Rallis had that defense humming there the second half of the season, really a testament to him and the players that were in that room. And so I think you can never have enough big guys. We've always said that, whether it's on the offensive line or the defensive line, like that. Those are hard positions. Those are physical, and those are grueling to get through a 17-game season. So the depth at those spots is always going to be something that we're going to look to add to, both the depth and the talent level. And so that doesn't change this year.
Kind of goes to be an adjustment period for some offensive linemen, even at the top. Is it harder now, given what the college game offers, to find a fourth rounder who can help you right away?
I think if you look just over the draft in general, it gets harder as you slide back at any position for players, and as you go back, just per play time percentage. I think we talk about it a lot. There's no bigger adjustment a player is going to make from whether it's their senior or junior year in college into that first year in the pros. And so, I think it's a challenge at every position. Offensive line, you can put that right up there, but I don't think that's the only position. I think it's on a case by case, and a lot of times it's opportunity based. A lot of guys, if there's injuries in front of them, they get opportunities. Some guys, there's no injuries, they don't get opportunities. So, I think that's always a development opportunity for players, no matter where they're picked, early, late, undrafted. But I think development is a huge part of, any position.
Harder than it used to be, Monty?
Harder than it used to?
be?
No, I wouldn't say that. No, I think, the college game is different. There's more space, but I think that's the case for a lot of positions, like the DBs, wide receivers, so the college game is different. So it's adjustment. I don't think it's harder than it used to be. It is what it is, really.
The defensive line.
So much cap space in fact influence what your approach is for free agency.
Yeah, I think it gives us opportunity. It gives us flexibility. I think it gives us, opportunities to see what the market is at certain positions. When you're tied up against the cap, that it limits what you can do. And so, it's just one of those things where you also have to be smart about it. You don't want to just spend to spend either. You got to make the right decisions. And if you historically look back and see teams that won the offseason or teams that won free agency, going back and looking at 2020, is that always the case 6, 9, 12 months later? I don't know. know. So, free agency is a great roster building tool. It absolutely is, and we're right here on the cusp of the two biggest roster building opportunities for us in free agency, followed by the draft. And so we're going to be active in both of them, and we're going to make smart decisions and things that we think are the right fit for our team, both the person, the makeup, and then also schematically who can help us the most.
The defensive line class this year in the draft has been labeled as very deep and versatile. You mentioned you can never have enough bodies on the line, and obviously, everyone saw what the Eagles did. What are some of those attributes and things that you've kind of seen from this defensive line class so far that kind of, align with your perspectives and your values and, your core just as a team?
Yeah, and I think really you hit it there. I think quantity is the big thing that stands out right away. I mean, we've gone a couple of years now where there hasn't been quantity in up front on defensive line, and that can be cyclical. Like some years there's, like last year it was a heavy receiver draft, and so things go up and down. There's the availability of players goes up and down, and so I think with anything it's finding the right flavor for what your team is looking for. I think we're a team that's going to value versatility, alignment versatility to play up and down the line. There's always going to be a premium placed on defensive front players that can affect the quarterback, and whether that's from inside or outside, I think there's value in both, and I think there's a number of people in the draft that can do that both from inside and outside the formation. And so that's we're excited we interviewed a number of those guys last night. We'll continue to do that throughout the week and see those guys work out this week. Omar.
How might the disappointing finish to the season provide clarity for what you need on the roster, how you need to improve going into next year?
Yeah, I think, obviously disappointed on how the season ended. We were excited about where we were sitting there after week 10, tied for first place. And then, even as it went through, playing those meaningful games, up until Christmas. And so, I think you get through the initial rush of after the season, there's some disappointment. Hey, like we were right there. And then you kind of take a step back and you look at it and, we go 2-5 there down the stretch and 3 or 4 of those 5 losses were by one-score games. A couple of them went down to the last play of the game, and but that's what this league is. Like, this league it's always going to be close. These games are always going to be competitive, and it's finding a way to get over the hump and win those games. And so, I think it's taking the lessons that we learned, where we have a young group of players that started to play in games that meant something late in the season, but also understanding that we did take a step last year. We did. A lot of players played. A lot of players got good experience, and now a lot of those players are going into their second and third season, so they're going to continue to make a jump, continue to grow, and we're going to add players to that mix. And so, there's a mix of, disappointment, not finishing where we wanted to, but also excitement about where we're heading.
Do you have hope that you might get a couple of your own guys re-signed in the next couple of weeks before we reach free agency?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's that's going to be a priority for us. We had a lot of guys that played snaps for us this past year, that provided quality depth for us, that were starters, and so those are things that we're going to try to work through. Because you never know. Like, we're going to try to get guys signed, and it takes 2 to do a deal. They got to make their decisions, and then once we go to market, that's that anything can happen at that point. So absolutely, that'll be a priority for us here over the next couple of weeks.
Do you feel like you're a guy that brands his game on physicality at the college level? What are some of the factors you can look at to make sure that physicality will translate to the NFL?
Well, I think there's no better way to translate that, to project that, than to how they play on their college tape. If there's a guy who is physical, tough, aggressive, violent, like, chances are that guy's going to continue to play like that. That's probably a tough skill to develop if a player doesn't play like that. Probably kidding ourselves a little bit to think that we're going to fix that and we're going to adjust that. Now, there's things that we can hopefully develop, technique, strength, things like that we can improve. Physicality, violence, I'm not sure that's one way that we can really fix.
Do you anticipate potentially adding to your quarterback room this offseason, whether it's with a veteran or draft pick?
Yeah, I think everything's on the table. We're going to look at every means, whether it's quarterback or any other position. I think you can never have enough competition at any spot. We never want to get to a point where we're just handing jobs out. And so we're going to look to add, whether that's free agency, the draft. Yeah, I think that's absolutely an avenue at quarterback room. You can add any position on our team that we're going to look to add.
What is Kyler's unique abilities at that position? Under 6-foot quarterbacks are exceedingly rare. What does an under 6-foot quarterback coming into this league, what traits do they need to possess other than being Kyler Murray?
Yeah, I mean, I think with that, those quarterbacks have always been that height, right? So whether they've played high school, college ball, they've learned to adapt and they've learned how to figure out how to make those adjustments. And so, I think as with anything, quarterbacks are going to have, there's going to be some important characteristics, accuracy, decision making, play extension. Those guys come in all shapes and sizes. There's been success at all shapes and sizes at that position. So, I think those guys learn how to adapt. They learn how to play the position, and it's really what they do with it that matters.
What is it about Ohio State receivers when you look at, obviously you took one last year, what is it about those guys, what Brian Hartline has done that kind of just keeps that conveyor belt going with Buckeyes?
Well, I think it starts with they get talented players. I think they get talented players, and they do. Ohio State's a great program, and they do a good job of developing guys, and they're playing in big, important games, and so you get good players, and you provide them good coaching, and give them a lot of resources to improve. I think you've seen what the results are.
It seems like a pretty deep edge class. What are your overall thoughts on it, and what do you specifically look for in an edge rusher?
Yeah, I think again with edge rushers, they come in all shapes and sizes. There's length, there's short guys, there's tall guys, there's thick guys, there's lean guys. I think there's different ways to affect the quarterback. Some guys do it through a variety of methods. Some guys speed to power. Some guys use a long arm. Some guys are pure athleticism, dip and rip and bend. So I think ultimately the goal of an edge rusher is to disrupt and to cause havoc. And so I think there's different ways to do that. And I think that this year's draft class is a great example of that. I think there's a bunch of different flavors of those edge guys. So it's going to be a fun group to sort through, as we go through and hopefully finding a couple that fit us.
With the needs on the roster this year, how do you approach filling them in free agency versus waiting for the draft to do that?
Yeah, I think that's always a balance, right? Because I think what we're trying to do is we talk about, hey, when we get through free agency, can we go out and play a game? Because I think what we don't want to do is we don't want to go into a draft and saying, hey, we absolutely have to draft this position to fill this need. I think that's a tough place to be in because you don't know who's going to be available. You don't know if that player is ready to fill that role, right? And so that's one area that we look at. And so I think that's a balance. It's a balance of the roster building of, hey, where are we going to sink our resources free agency wise, and then that opens up possibilities in the draft to, hey, whatever comes our way, that's going to be an addition to our team, but that's part of roster construction, and we'll work through that here over the next couple of weeks. So all right guys, hey, thanks a lot, great seeing you guys. Yep.